Democracy in Conversation. Welcome back to Democracy in Conversation. Today I have a very special guest who's visiting Ottawa, Matías Bianchi from Argentina, who is part of the organization Asunto del Sur, which is a democracy innovation organization that works around the world. And you're here right now because of the Civic Space Summit that's happening in Ottawa this week. But we met for the first time in Senegal in 2017 at the World Movement for Democracy Global Assembly. And that's an assembly that brings 400 democracy and human rights advocates from all around the world, phenomenal people. So I'm just really happy that you're in town and that we were able to bring you into the conversation here.
Thank you, Anita. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so maybe just start by telling us a little bit about the organization and what you do.
Yeah, this Asunto del Sur is a think, do tank, focused on democratic innovation in the Global South. What does it mean? Is that we pursue applied research with the communities. You know that most of the concepts that we work on, like democratic resilience or democracy itself or intersectionality, most of the interesting concepts, called governance, they come from the global north. So what does it mean to people? What does it mean to people in the field to re-signify those concepts? How, and also to bring evidence for impact. We really think that research is power. And then we also we work with communities, we work with governments, we work with international organizations, pushing for an agenda for having more inclusive, paritary, and participatory democracies.
So you've been all over the world, and you work in some of really difficult areas, and you have written also articles about what happens when democracy is lost, when there is a regression into authoritarianism, and how hard it is to ever come back from that, and the need to prevent that from happening in the first place. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what that danger is, and how you work around the world to try to prevent the authoritarian and regressive movements from taking hold in the first place.
There are two pieces of recent research that we've done. One is we systematize and we show how autocracies, they start by words. Naming, shaming, insulting, that's the way to create narratives and common senses that erode in democracy. And the silver lining of that is that current autocrats, they tell you beforehand what they're going to do. So that gives us a hint on how to prevent, because you know what they're going to be doing. They tell you what they think about women, they tell you what they think about climate change, they tell you what they think about production or anything, any field. But the other, and another that is complementary to this, is that we show, you see, VDEM is a big, large initiative measuring democracy around the world. Using those data sets, we've seen that since 1994, the 90% of countries that experience a backlash in democracy, a backslide, on democracy, 90% of them do not recover. So what does it tell us? It tells us that we cannot afford to lose our precious democratic capital. Why do they not come back? Is because autocracies also penetrate on the judicial system. They put their people. They get into autonomous institutions, agencies. They destroy the free press. They destroy the ecosystem of civil society. And it's not just we vote, we kick Orbán out like it just happened in Hungary, and we're back to business as usual. No, it takes a lot of time. So the lesson that we are taking, and we're trying to put the voice out, is that we really need to protect our democratic system, our democratic capital, and we cannot take for it. It's just words. They're just saying it's just Twitter. They're just on X. It's just political campaign. We need to take that seriously, and we need to protect our democratic capital.
So you're saying that people they tell you what they plan to do.
Yes.
Often, I think when there's very damaging and hateful and undemocratic rhetoric, it is easily dismissed as, well, they're just doing that to get votes, but that's not, no one would ever really do that.
Exactly.
Because it's actually unthinkable, right? There are things that, you just can't imagine when you've grown up with democracy and taken it for granted. But can you tell us very specifically what are these flags? Like, what is it that we should be watching for? What are the things that are said? What language, what words are used to alert people?
I can tell you about an experience that we're doing now. I'm actually going now to Spain because we're presenting there the project. We have developed a set of markers of democratic backsliding. It's a methodology with dimensions and indicators. We borrowed the idea from a very prestigious book, that How Democracies Die by Bianchi and Ziblatt, and they talk about 4 dimensions in that book. And that book is from 2018, so it's before all this wave that we experienced. So we did it first for Argentina, and then we did it more complex. We have 6 dimensions that we measure, and that's, we have systematized, and we've done 4 countries, and we're expanding to more. I want to make it global. So the dimensions are related to how they treat vulnerabilized populations. How, if they are animalize them. I don't know if that's a word in English.
Yeah, or objectify or
dehumanize.
Yeah.
But I use the word animalize. I invented that word probably because they use animals. And it's a playbook that they repeat that is very similar in many places. Then if they respect the institutions and the constitution, or this say about democracy, also what they if their tolerance to violence, if there's what happened in the U.S. taking the Capitol, and you're, oh well, these are just, they're protesting, if you're like kind of thing, or if they're killing black people on the streets, and so all of that, how permissive or even encouraging you are, we measure that. So we take 6 dimensions that we think that are crucial, but also we also want to see elements that are positive, things that in which, look, there's young people in this area, they're really organizing themselves, they are pushing back. There's free press that is working and that we need to protect. Look, the judiciary power is accepting like strategic litigation, defending human rights. So there are things, because democracy is always moving. It's not just one thing. It's not a dichotomic variable. Yeah. So also to detect what is good. Women that are less polarized than men. So let's work with them. So that's the kind of things that we're aiming to see.
So going on this idea of words, and that words matter, and how you speak about your opponents actually matters. I find that in a democratic society, we tend toward people can say what they want, they can have their opinions, and in democracy, we are debating the issues, but more and more, even here in Canada, we're starting to debate the person. And rather than say, I disagree with this person, it becomes words like traitor or treason, and the polarization is starting to make people
not see. That's a polite part.
No, that's a polite, well, and I've been the recipient of certain words. But what you're saying is that when those words are used, it is dehumanizing, and it actually does erode the very freedom of speech, the very freedom democratic expression because it is making
the civic discourse. We are part of a community in which language is crucial. How we live together, how we relate together. And we take many times that for granted. And it's just an insult. Just say, hey, whatever, because somebody parked the car wrong. But if we systematize that, it becomes an erosion of the social contract.
We can't normalize it.
And there's something that is worse when it comes from authorities. When it's the authority that is saying that enables this to the other actor. Let me give an example from my country. We have our president Javier Milei. So he has an issue with women. I don't know why he hates them so much. And so there is a group of supporters that were anti-women, whatever group. So, but there was an activist that months ago he killed his mother-in-law, his partner, and stole that. Because when you get into that, it creates a common sense about women at this, and then so it's any action is an explanation of how they are. It started with the words, but then it was a feminicide.
So the words become action, and it actually normalizes behaviors that would otherwise not be considered part of civil society. How do we stop it? I mean, I guess the first question is...
The good thing is that we can say with words.
Right.
They're already telling us.
There you go, yeah.
So we need to protect the civil discourse. If they, as I remember Michelle Obama several years ago, she said, when they go low, we go high.
Exactly.
And even if it sounds like a cliche, I think there is something. Because there is a level in which government should act, like parliamentary should make regulations about civic space. But also there is a role of us in society to work across the aisle with people that are different to us and go back to discuss issues. And at the personal level, again, make the exercise to do that. So, and we have a specific challenge with words. Is that now the space of the civic discourse is mostly, the public civic discourse happens in platforms that are owned by private companies, that are economically and powerful actors, and they are even telling us they want to shape the world the way they want. That is a challenge because our institutions are not well equipped to control that. So we really need to find new ways to create social and democratic power to recreate the rules.
And how do we do that? Is that through, because one of the things we're doing here at the Democracy in Conversation, having those conversations with one another, calling out, because often when somebody hears something vile that is very hateful, they just turn away, ignore it. But ignoring it may not be the answer. So what do people, there's a lot of people watching this, they're not politicians, they're not elected, they're not on a global stage, but in their own community, they're concerned about this. What can those individuals do to preserve the democracy and to use words, but how do they actually do that? What does that look like? Do you have examples where that's been done well?
Well, I think there are several examples. I think there's nothing more universal that people together. The algorithm doesn't have, it's kryptonite for the algorithm. And when people get together, when people create alliances, when people, these organized communities and the decision makers get closer to them, they also get stronger vis-a-vis the platform they're trying to regulate. So there is something that still works, that is people together.
And we've seen it even here. I mean, during COVID in Parliament, we saw that the attacks were just much worse when we were on Zoom, because when you're sitting across the table in a committee and you say something and they just attack you, and you just, huh. And then suddenly there's something in us as humans. We see that reaction, and then we respond. And so, how do we then create? Because I know that in our own lives we can meet with other people, but how do we do it in a way that people who don't necessarily agree with one another, who wouldn't necessarily see each other in a social circle, but that are still talking to each other, but I guess really listening. I do this every week in my parliamentary office where I have a coffee hour, but how do you do that in regular daily life? And how different is it in a place like Canada versus in Argentina or other places that you're working?
I think this is a global challenge. It's happening. Our kids are isolated. They're not talking to each other. We need to get them back to play, to play together, to do things together, to go back and read books, and we need to get them offline. Or online for specific tools, but not to live there, not to inhabit those spaces. So if we get the algorithms outside, we're still gonna have many problems, but we can go back to that. So that's at the micro level. We also have the big discussions about economic models and regulations and that are discussed in places like this. But they have to go together, the discussions. I don't see the discussions, because if you regulate something, like some countries are doing no social media for until you're 16, it's like prohibition of alcohol. Remember in the 30s, what happened? People were just doing it. So if it doesn't come with education, if that doesn't have with communities working, there's no solution.
So it makes me think about, when I was young, when you were young, we didn't have that whole universe of online algorithms. And you talked about play, and you talked about the connection between people. What is it just go back to your childhood and your youth, what is it when you look back that maybe created the desire in you to actually go around the world working on connecting people, working on having words and conversations and doing this kind of incredible work? And what would that young you think about the work you're doing today?
Well, it was a preoccupation for me since I was a teenager. We had a governor that got reelected 5 times in a row. It was like governor in spaces like that in which society is highly dependent on employment for the public investment. Anyways, so that was what triggered me, is like I wanna change that. It was the same families being ruling the place for 150 years almost. So that's what triggered me. I want to do something different, and particularly there was one policy at that moment. I was in the national government was passing laws the idea was to reform public education. Okay. So that's how I got engaged on trying to make more participatory students' governance in the reforms, resisting the neoliberal reforms for public education. All of that is what got me engaged.
And often it is an issue. I'm finding in a lot of my conversations, it's a particular issue that drives people, and then they continue. So I guess I just want a final question about what keeps you going? Because you must see, when you go around the world, you must see some very disturbing trends. What is it when you wake up in the morning that keeps you going, that keeps you hopeful, that at the end of the day, our humanity, our shared common experience is going to prevail and allow us to continue in democracies where we actually have a voice and a say and listen to each other?
I think that we live in a world that's worth fighting for. We have had amazing things in our societies that are worth fighting for. Our families are worth fighting for. And also the inspiration of the people that we work with. People that I've seen in this summit, that I was here, that I was listening of this woman from Ecuador that in Guatemala, that she was fighting corruption. They put her in jail, and they were like, she was not having health care, she was not having medicine, and she had little kids, and they were threatening the family. And she said that she needed to make a better work for her family. Yeah. So if she's doing that, who am I to stop something that I'm doing something from my safety and privilege of my position? At least I need to do the work that I'm doing.
Well, I think that is a very good note to end on. I admire the work you're doing. I think you are one of those people. I'm so happy that we were able to bring so many people like you to Ottawa and to be able to have these conversations. So thank you very, very much. And this is Democracy in Conversation.
Thank you very much.